Hi folks, you are very, very welcome to this week's episode of Genos Live, and we are delighted to have with us Vanessa Druskat to talk on belonging. Let me tell you that Vanessa in the very near future will be bringing out a new book, and those of you who are here today hearing about belonging will be able to say, I heard about belonging before you did. I heard about belonging and how important it was long before the book came out, because it's one of those concepts that I think is really going to resonate with you in these days when we're talking about connecting people, getting people working more effectively together, helping people to recover from the effects of the pandemic and the effects of the political situation in the world. So you can say, I saw it first. I was there first. So we're going to welcome Vanessa on in a couple of moments. Before we do that, let me just ask you if just pop into the chat. Where are you dialing in from? And because we're about, for those of us who celebrate it, we're about to go into the Easter celebration, and some people have a long weekend that actually starts at close of business today. Others are just taking the Monday. But before we do, let's go for a little bit of feel good. Why not share the very best thing that has happened to you this week? So share the love around. There's so much adversity in the world. It'd be really lovely to hear what has gone well for you. So pop that in, and Aoife will come in a couple of moments and talk about that. Before that, as you know, if you're a regular guest here, we always do a 2-minute, what in the old American shows might have been called a word from our sponsor, a 2-minute advert. I'm from Genos International. My name is Derek McCann. We're an emotional intelligence organization. We develop a full range of assessments that help people to show up to the people around them in an emotionally intelligent way. And around those, we've built a series of programs for helping to develop emotionally intelligent cultures, emotionally intelligent leaders, emotionally intelligent salespeople, psychologically safe environments, and so on and so forth. And of course, over the last 2 years, with the pandemic, one of the things that's been really, really hot has been helping people build the resilience to deal with difficult times. We also, and this is a large part of what we do, we also certify emotional intelligence practitioners, something I'll talk to you about a little bit more. I'm going to give you 50 seconds on this in a moment. In doing what we do, we have for the last 5 years, please God this year it will become 6, been one of trainingindustries.com's top 20 assessment companies in the world, something we're very proud of. Now, as I mentioned, a large part of what we do is we help internal OD, HR people and independent coaches, consultants and trainers to add emotional intelligence to their skill set and to their offerings. We have a program coming up in June, and before that comes up, there are a couple of events like the International Coaching Week from ICF. So I just wanted to give you a quick 50-second piece of video that just talks to you about our certification program, because if you've been thinking of getting a credential to help you develop a more emotionally intelligent culture or to help your clients do so, I think it'll be useful. So let me share that with you, and then we're straight on to business. Here we go. And so if you've been thinking of developing some emotional intelligence programs or starting to develop an emotional intelligent culture for your organization or your clients, this would be a good time to look at the certification program. I'm alerting you a couple of months ahead of time because we provide early bird discounts. And also for you ICF folks out there, with International Coaching Week, ask us about the discount we have for ICF coaches. There is, down the bottom there, you can see that there's a QR code where you can get more information. Aoife is also popping a link into the chat in case you want to know more about it. For ICF folks, it qualifies for continuing education credits. Okay, so moving right along, let me tell you what's coming next week. Next week we have Andreas van der Heet, who is the former Director of Talent for Amazon Global, and he is also the author of Creating a Coaching Culture. And so we'll have him next week talking specifically about how to build a coaching culture. And Andreas and Vanessa and the other guests we've had so far are part of a really an all-star lineup that's coming up over the next few months. If it's your first time here, I recommend to you, why not look at the link that Aoife's about to post and sign up for the reminders. If you register, we send you out a reminder of each week of each session. Now, we're just about to bring in Vanessa, who is who's why you're here. But before I do that, let me ask Aoife if she can just tell me. Aoife, so who have we got with us, and what are they telling us about their week?
Sure. Hi, Derek. How are you today?
Never better. But tomorrow is starting a holiday weekend, so it's a good day to ask.
Are we closed tomorrow?
No, it's starting the holiday weekend. No, don't run away with yourself. Yeah.
Only joking. Yeah, we've lots of people joining again from around the world. Lots of Irish folks today as well, from Navan, from West Cork, from Kildare, from Leixlip. A few folks from Australia, from the Middle East, from Normandy in France. Sarah's joining us from the Netherlands, and Eric from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Welcome, folks.
Yeah, you're all very welcome, and I know that, Eric. Welcome, Eric. I'm trying to think what time it is for you. I don't think it's early morning or late night. I think it's just kind of late in your day. So, but
no one has. Sorry, Derek. You might want to repeat the short little ask that we had at the start of the session, because I think a lot of people have just joined. So Derek was asking, in the spirit of the holiday weekend, if you'd like to share with us one really great thing that happened this week. Is that correct, Derek?
Yeah, anything that just promotes the sense of feel good, because God knows we can get all the sense of feel bad that we need just by switching on the TV or going into the news services. So share with us what's one thing that's gone really well for you this week, and we'll pull Aoife back in, who will share some of that with us. Now, you're here to hear Vanessa, so let us bring Vanessa in first off. You are very welcome, Vanessa. Thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
No, we are really excited to be here. And you know, the folks who are here who intuitively feel, ooh, belonging, that sounds like something I should be interested in. I think by the end of it, they'll be even more excited that they caught this, because I think we are seeing something that's going to have an impact on the world. Before we get talking with Vanessa, why don't you do a little introduction there, Aoife, and just tell the folks, give the formal introduction to Vanessa.
Of course, I would be delighted to. Very, very delighted to have you with us today, Vanessa. I think this topic is something that is kind of relevant to everyone, especially over the last few years and how our workplaces have shifted. But for those of you that haven't yet had the pleasure of seeing or hearing Vanessa, she is an associate professor of organisational behaviour at the University of New Hampshire, and also an applied social psychologist who uses her deep knowledge of social systems to help answer real world questions facing organisations today. As a coach to leaders and their teams, she's delivered measured performance improvement services over a dozen Fortune 500 and Fortune Global 500 companies in banking, pharmaceutical, petroleum, and healthcare industries. And her extremely popular Harvard Business Review article with S. Wolff on emotionally intelligent teams has been reprinted many times as one of HBR's most valued articles. We'll make sure to share some more information on that shortly. And she's also an award-winning teacher who consults with leaders and teams in organizations around the world. So really, really delighted to have her with us today. I know Derek was really excited. He said, just wait until you see Vanessa's energy about her topic. So we're really excited to have you with us, Vanessa. Thanks for being here. I'm going to be behind the scenes, and I'm going to be gathering comments, questions, feedback from the audience, and have a great conversation. I'll see you towards the end.
That's great. And Aoife, I have you on a screen in the background. So when you have questions you just give a little wave there and we'll pull you back in for questions in the middle of things. Take care. Thanks.
Perfect.
Thanks, Aoife. So once again, Vanessa, you're very, very welcome. And the first time that I heard you talking on this topic, you were presenting to the Consortium for Research in Emotional Intelligence. And to use an expression of an old boss of mine, it really got my socks rolling up and down. But tell me, when we spoke during the week, you said that where this interest in belonging came from was the years of research that you've put into your model for team emotional intelligence. Would it be good to give folks a sense of what that model is and what it does so we understand the genesis of belonging?
Absolutely. So yes, thank you again for having me, and I'm just very excited to be sharing my latest research on belonging, and it's a great idea to start with where I started. And so I've been studying teams and the dynamics in teams for 30 years. My interest was always in team dynamics. I think it was because couldn't quite figure them out. You know, we always join topics that are curious to us. So I started off my career looking at using a specific paradigm to understand teams. I looked at teams that were absolutely outstanding, collected performance data on them and nominations, and went into organizations, got samples of teams that were really great, and teams that were average performers. And of course, most teams are average performers. And I compared the two. And I looked at identifying what it was that the outstanding teams were doing that the average teams were not doing. And I did that in a number of organizations for a number of years. And that was what allowed me to build the team emotional intelligence model with my good colleague, Steve Wolff. So we analyzed all the data, and it was clear that emotions mattered and that the outstanding teams were building a culture where a positive, engaged emotion was emerging from the team. And so probably the biggest difference between the outstanding and the average teams is that the average teams had, strong, all the fundamentals right. They had good goals that were clear and engaging. They had clear roles for folks. They ran good meetings, but they didn't build a culture that absolutely engaged and motivated folks and brought out their best. And so we built that model and wrote it up for the Harvard Business Review and shared it in a bunch of places. Pretty soon we started getting calls and requests to come in and work with teams.
Wow.
And so I then spent 15 years working with teams to help them build a more emotionally intelligent culture. So let me say one more thing about what the emotionally intelligent culture looks like. So you absolutely have to have those fundamentals in place. So you got to really have clear goals, because people get nervous when they don't know where they're going. So you build a foundation of clear goals and clear roles so that you can now focus on where you're going. But the other thing we found was that in outstanding cultures, there were 3 buckets of normative behaviors. And normative behaviors are habits. They're rituals, routines, and they grow out of values that the teams have. And so they basically build a culture that coordinates behavior, moves it in a certain direction. And what we found was these cultures had 3 what we call buckets of norms. So the culture could be easily defined by these 3 buckets of norms. In the first bucket were habits around how we treat one another. Okay, so they made sure they were respectful. Okay? They made sure they gave one another feedback because they were interested in developing one another, and they built relationships. They focused. Today people say we don't have time to build relationships. I got to tell you, these outstanding teams spend time. They do a little bit of time periodically so that eventually people get to know one another. So that's the first bucket, and it's fundamental to building great outcomes like trust. Second bucket is involving the teams in continuous improvement. So what they did was they periodically, habitually, got the team members together to talk about, what were the strengths in the team, what were the weaknesses, what were upcoming threats, so that they could be proactive about what was coming up, threats. Team members love that, by the way. What's the other one? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. What were some opportunities they might be missing? So the team members were involved in those conversations. And that's critical to feeling a sense of ownership of what goes on in the team. The last bucket, of course, won't surprise you. And it's about stakeholders. Yeah. So the outstanding teams never forgot their stakeholders. And so they would invite stakeholders in. I mean, they created plans. They focused some attention on recognizing that stakeholders had information that could make them better performers. And so anyway, those were the 3 buckets of norms. We took that out on the road, all over the world, in fact, and built teams. You know, we get called in from leaders who said, something's not quite right. This could be better. You know, we've been trying to build their individual emotional intelligence, but it's not doing enough. It's not doing enough, which is common because let me just say that I'm a huge proponent of building emotional intelligence. But if you put emotionally intelligent people in a complicated environment, they don't apply their emotional intelligence. We know that personality, skills, attitudes are impacted by the environment more than by the skills that you bring in. And so the environment you create, the culture that you create, has a huge impact on the way people will behave. And what you want to do is build an emotionally intelligent culture that brings the best out of people and creates this sense of camaraderie, sense of team. And let me say one more thing about this, because I can see you got a question coming out of your mouth.
No. Keep going.
One of the things that I find with leaders is they often don't have a picture that they're aiming at. So when they're developing a team, one of the things the Team EI model enables them to do is have these 3 things that they're looking at and they're aiming toward, because we know those 3 things build, more constructive, conversations and trust and all great things that lead to collaboration and trust. Collaboration and high performance.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, and it weaves throughout this, and the same with the conversation we had a couple of days ago. Teams who get here, whether it's conscious or not, they are to the point where they're really emotionally intelligent, highly functional teams. They're very intentional about those 3 buckets, right? It's more than just, as you say, the goals and the roles and the responsibilities. There is a very great intentionality around making us a team and getting us work together, not just as individuals.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
And so tell me, from that, belonging kind of grew up out of the data and out of the research. And the lovely thing about belonging is the moment you say, I'm going to talk about belonging in a team, everybody who's on this call has a sense, and at its core, it's correct as to what belonging is, and which is great. It's lovely to have a concept like that. Can you tell us where it came out of that research and what belonging means in the context of a team?
Sure. So let me first define it for you.
Yeah.
So we know we belong when we feel that we're fully accepted, understood, known, and supported in a team.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're not worrying about what we say. We're not worrying about what people think of us. They like us warts and all. They know us. They know what we bring. Okay. And so it turns out that is it's an inbred motive.
Okay.
It's our primary social motive. So let me just cap that at that, and let me tell you how I came to starting to think about this concept. So we were on the road, as I mentioned. I spent years helping teams develop, and the model was working so well. It just was working super well. It was changing teams, and I couldn't quite figure out why. There was something missing in it for me because, a lot of us in this field are somewhat touchy-feely. I've never really considered when I was in graduate school, I had to take 5 courses in statistics, and I'm a statistician, and I'm a
not touchy-feely.
And I would always resist. I always would say to the teams, why do you think this relationship development matters so much? Because I didn't really know the answer. So anyway, I said, okay, I'm going back I'm ready to write about this model, but I need to go back to the literature. I need to go back and do some research. So I stopped traveling, and spent about 5 years digging deeply into the literature. And I came upon this model of belonging. And it was hidden in the psychological literature. And by the way, this was before, diversity, equity, inclusion started coming out as important, which is fantastic, fantastic change. But it was hidden away. It turns out there's been a lot of research on belonging in the psychological literature. Most of it is about individual differences in belonging. And by the way, we do have individual differences, but everyone has the need to belong. Yeah. So I realized that what we were doing when we were building Team EI was we were building a sense of belonging in this team. And belonging creates a sense of ownership. It creates a sense of openness. It pulls you in. Belonging motivates what we call pro-social behavior. So pro-social behavior is when we're willing to give to the team and to the team members despite the personal costs to ourselves. Right. And as everyone knows, I'm sure you know, Derek, that's what you're aiming at in a team. Always. You want a team where people are giving. Yeah. And it does come at a cost. If I have to coach you more than you coach me, it's coming at a cost. The effort I put in is coming at a cost to my individual work. And so team researchers have for a long time known that team members are actually what we call motivated strategists. They don't always bring their full selves to the team. Right. And if you think your team is bringing its full self to its team, to the team, and give its full effort, you might be fooled, because you need to create a culture where that's the norm, because nobody likes to be played the fool where others are doing it and they are. So anyway, back to the Team EI. What I discovered is this is exactly what we were doing. And, I started going out and talking to these teams, and people confirm, yes, this is exactly what it feels like. And so now I had a new concept that I had to really understand. So let me stop and ask what your questions are.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we spoke about this during the week, one of the things that really fascinated me, you were very eloquent around how belonging in general is a kind of a primary need that we all have, and that a sense of belonging, or perhaps even more, an absence of a sense of belonging, have very, very defined impacts in our brains. Can you talk a little bit about how it feels, or how that works when we feel the belonging, how it works, and what impact it has when we feel that we don't belong?
Yes, great questions. So the part of the current research that's most exciting for me is the neuroscience that's been done. And basically, we now know that we crave belonging. In fact, when we feel that we have a sense of belonging, we get sort of an endorphin high, right? It turns out that belonging was favored through evolution, because if you didn't belong in a group, in a community, you were dead, right? You couldn't fight off the woolly mammoths. Sure. You couldn't get your food. You couldn't pass on your genes. You couldn't procreate. And so we have a very sensitive meter to this belonging. Evolution created in us a way of being sensitive to nonverbals and the cues and things that let us know whether we're in or whether we're at risk for being out. And so when we're in, we feel good. We want to maintain that. We feel motivated, a lot of positive emotion. And in particular, we feel homeostatic. We relax. Yeah. Okay. When we don't feel like we belong, and this is where the neuroscience gets interesting, we feel slightly under threat. And that closes down our ability to think and be our best selves. And what it ultimately does is it makes us slightly more selfish. Right. Okay. We're more self-protective. So not only are we wasting our cognitive resources on scanning the environment more rather than being homeostatic and performing and focusing on the team, we're focusing on ourselves, and we're being protective. We're being careful what we say. Yeah. We're being careful we're not going to be rejected, because rejection creates social pain, and it lights up in our brain in the same exact spot where we feel physical pain. So any sort of ostracism, rejection. Now, let me tell you what that looks like in a team.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We're having a Zoom call. I'm talking to you, Derek. We're part of a team. All of a sudden, you pick up your cell phone while I'm talking. Or I hear you typing on your thing.
Clicking away. I'm listening to you.
Okay, that's a signal that you never miss that. We're wired to pick up on those signals.
Yeah.
Or you don't look me in the eye when I'm talking. Now, leaders don't often notice that because nobody does it when they're talking.
Yeah.
People with high status and leaders and things by definition belong. They are secure. They are known, right? But anyway, so when you start to feel that, you become very self-protective.
Sure.
You don't want to say the wrong thing all of a sudden. And in fact, I'll tell you, I'm going to ask what your questions are next, but just as a preview, it's a very difficult to get out of that. When you don't feel like you belong, you can't make yourself belong.
Yeah.
You have to be invited back in, which is why building a culture where it's part of the water matters.
And that comes back to that whole awareness on the part of the leader. It's an interesting point you make that the leader doesn't notice this because people don't behave that way in front of her. And so that awareness of the importance of creating that sense of belonging is obviously, absolutely critical. In the paper, you talk as well about belonging as kind of being a motivator. And you say, for example, when people feel that sense of belonging, like you said earlier, they have this pro-social motivation to take certain actions. But on the other side of it as well, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said it can result in, outcomes like gossip or unkind attributions to other folks. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because as I read it, this is not something where there's a neutral. It seems like it's on or it's off. You belong or you don't. It's not like I feel a little bit belonging. And if you're not feeling you're belonging, you're feeling you're not belonging. And that has a big impact upon the way you show up in the team, right?
Yes and no. I'm not sure if it's a toggle off and on. I assume it's somewhat of a continuum, where you're more or less. Because what I do know is that small changes have big impact.
Right.
So, but still, it's a slippery slope. When your team is not engaging in behaviors, which I'll tell you about in a second, and people start to get fearful, because what ends up happening is it creates a negative cycle. So you do want to move up as far as you can on the belonging scale. So let me first say about the negative cycle, and then I'll come back to how you get out of that. But so the negative cycle is that when I start to feel ostracized or ignored, and by the way, recent study shows that 61% of employees report feeling ostracized and ignored in their organization.
Wow, 61%.
61%. It's a rampant problem. It's a huge area of research right now in the organizational behavior field, is this uncivil behavior and what it's doing to people. But anyway, so what happens is that you first try to ingratiate yourself. So the first instinct is to, I'm gonna try to get back in by being nice, and it doesn't work because you can't. It's an intractable problem. You can't force yourself in. So what ends up happening is you lose self-control. So for your audience, you probably, if you know something about emotional intelligence, you know that one of the great abilities that we try to work toward is managing your emotions, right? But when you feel you don't belong, the threat helps you lose that self-control. And you want to get more control over your respect in the group. And it turns out to be a trigger for really bad behavior. So what does that look like? You check out. I mean, I see this all the time. People who sit far back and disengage. Because you can't reject me. I'm rejecting myself. It's a form of control. You talk over and over and over again. You want to make sure you're heard, right? You behave badly. And it turns out that a lot of bad behavior, and I know this now from my own work with teams, but a lot of bad behavior comes out of people's sense that they are not respected, that they're not included, that they're the only one. And that's the big fear, right? Yeah. They're getting ready to get kicked out, and they're just prioritizing. What the research shows is that we prioritize control over prioritizing our relationships.
Right.
And I know this happens because when we built Team EI in teams, those people who've been engaging in bad behavior, all of a sudden they feel some sense of control and they're back.
Yeah.
And they're managing themselves better. So okay, so how do you what happens? What happens? What do you need to do in order to create this sense of belonging? One, it comes out of that first bucket that the Team EI does, which is that people need to be known and they need to feel appreciated and have a sense of social worth.
Okay.
So we all want to feel good about ourselves, and when we're in a team, we define how our worth by how worthy the team feels we are. So you have to have norms where we get to know one another's skills, and then I have to affirm those skills, you know? So like Derek, I mean, I would love to have you in my team because you're so friendly and warm and smart and engaging, you know. So there's a few things.
Yeah.
You bring a lot of social worth to every group you're in. I've been in groups with you and I know that to be true. Yeah. So anyway, we make this a habit where we recognize people for what they're doing. It's a recognition culture, I've heard it called, but more than that, you got to get known too. You got to get to know each other as the first step. The second thing that we know builds belonging, and this is in the literature on belonging, is what we call, it's a funky title, but a shared sense of reality or shared understanding of what's going on, current situation. So people, we always worry that our perceptions aren't accurate. And if we don't have accurate perceptions of what's really going on in the team or in the organization or with the leader, we risk losing our belonging. We risk losing our status. And so it's a priority for us is to vet our ideas with others. And I just did this the other day. I came out of a meeting and immediately I had a phone call from my girlfriend who's in the team with me saying, what's going on there? What do you think? And so a lot of the conversations happen outside. That's what a lot of gossip is about. We're just trying to vet our ideas and find, was that weird to you or what do you think? Okay, so what you need to do to fight that is to bring those conversations back into the team. And you will recall that bucket of Team EI, which is where we bring in the SWOT analysis and we routinely evaluate. We have open conversations. We make it easy for people to speak their mind and people get to add to the story. We come out of that with a shared model of what's really going on and how we're going to move forward. This enables people to know that they can maintain their belonging. They know what they need to do to maintain their status. And then again, one other thing which is strongly related and correlated to this need for shared reality is this desire for some level of influence and control. Right. And so shared reality gives me, when I can contribute to that shared reality, I maintain some sense of control and influence. And we've long known that control and influence is a strong motivator. And now we know that one of the reasons it's a strong motivator is it's a sub-motivator to belonging. If we don't have control, we can't maintain our positive identity, our self-worth, etc. when we're in a group, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So those are three things. And anyway, let me ask your questions because...
Okay, so yeah, let's come back to those three in a couple of moments. I'm going to bring Aoife in for a moment and just see if we've any questions popping in there. Aoife, anything hopping into chat there for Vanessa? Because I'm sure like me, people are scribbling down notes and I want to give them an opportunity to get some value today as well. So here she is.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Vanessa. A lot of people, including myself, really loved your line. The environment you create has a huge impact on the way people will behave. A few people shared it back into the chat. So we do have one question from Maya. So how would you position belonging alongside psychological safety, which I know is a hot topic as well at the moment?
Okay, fabulous question. Thank you for that. Psychological safety is an outcome variable. And so it's like trust. And the environment we create builds it. So in academic speak, we call psychological safety and trust and identity emergent states. And they emerge from the way we're interacting. Okay. And so the absolutely psychological safety is a brilliant concept, and I talk about it a lot, but how you get there is often confusing for people. And I can tell you that belonging, creating a sense of belonging, a culture of belonging, leads to a sense of safety, right? And belonging motivates behavior. Psychological safety doesn't motivate. Once you're motivated, it allows you to safely say what's on your mind. You know you're not going to be rejected. Basically, psychological safety is, it's safe here to speak my mind. It's safe here to really, you know, push back on things and to be myself. That's okay. But you have a culture that leads into that, and you're safe, but are you motivated to give your best information? Are you motivated to give your best effort? And belongingness motivates and creates safety at the same time. That's how I would describe it.
Very helpful.
I'm going to stop right there and ask for your follow-up. You bet.
Great.
No, that's very helpful. And this is a fantastic question from you. Okay, how can someone? And apologies for looking down. The comments come in a lot quicker on the phone than the computer. I'm with you. I'm here.
I know you are. I know you are.
How can someone regain their sense of belonging if they've been ostracized or othered? Would you advise that they leave the environment?
That is a great question, because it's a conundrum. Yeah. The best thing you can do is go to someone with status and say, you know, I don't feel comfortable in this team. I'm not feeling comfortable. And I would imagine if I'm not feeling comfortable, other people also aren't. Okay. Yeah. It's rare that it's one person. I mean, often we will scapegoat one person, but it's rare that it's one person. When we scapegoat one person, everyone's a little on edge because they know they can be next. Yeah. So you go to someone and you say, can we talk about this? There's some I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm not feeling safe. Safety is a great word to say it. And I really want to feel more comfortable so I can deliver my best work. And can we have a conversation about it? The change has to come from the leader. This is one of the reasons why I'm only one of many reasons I'm a huge proponent of emotional intelligence development and training, because our research shows that if you're an emotionally intelligent leader, you're more in tune to this kind of stuff. And so you're more open to those kinds of changes. And so it's the emotional intelligence of the leader and the influential people that really impacts whether a team builds team emotional intelligence or whether they build a sense of belonging. If the leader isn't in, and I've had the honor, I guess, I don't know how to call it, of trying to work with trying to change the culture of teams when the leader doesn't get emotion, doesn't understand, doesn't feel a sense of belonging themselves. And the research bears this out. They end up not building very cohesive or teams that have a sense of belonging in them. So hopefully I've answered your question there.
Yeah, no,
somewhere in there. Okay, good.
Derek, I have several more questions, but I know you have an agenda, so shall I continue?
Let's take one more for now, and then, because we want to dive back in and just try and bring those last three, I'm going to use the buckets term again, those last three heads for building belonging, and just talk about what that looks like in reality. But let's take one more. Perfect.
So Eric would love to hear a little bit more about the connection between D&I and belonging.
Oh, sure. Thank you for that great question. Truth be known, I've always been a D&I person. That comes from, actually, my dad was in international development work. I traveled all around the world my entire life, coming in and out of different cultures, and I often saw what happens when you're different, when you're different in different environments. And so I grew up caring about people having voice, diverse people having voice in a team. And one of the reasons I got so excited about Team EI was that it enabled that, right? So what belonging, and I think one of the problems that we find with people who are different in teams, for whatever reasons, they're from a different culture, or they're, a different race, or different, well, so many different things on, handicap, we're talking a lot these days about that kind of thing. They often don't feel like they belong. I mean, we typically don't communicate. Those are typically the first people to have someone pull up the phone when they're talking. And they end up, it creates a negative cycle. And so we can say we're including someone in the table. We can say we value diversity and equity. And we absolutely need to have structure in place for that, okay? We need to get people on the team that are diverse. We know that matters, right? And we need to treat them equitably when it comes to, climbing the ladder. But if we don't help them feel like they belong in the environment, they leave. I mean, one of the problems that we have here I live in the state of New Hampshire. We're 60 miles north of Boston. We do not have a very diverse culture here. And at the university, we've constantly been trying to hire people of different races, from different cultures, different religious backgrounds. We're trying to make the environment more diverse. They come here and we don't create enough sense of belonging, and they leave. They go elsewhere where they feel more comfortable, where they can be themselves. Yeah. And so you have to, in that first bucket of getting to know one another, really valuing the differences that we bring, the distinctive individual and what they bring, taking the time to identify what they bring. So I have this exercise that I work with teams on. If you've got a multicultural team, I have a list of things that vary from culture to culture, right? I mean, and even as different from the United States and the United Kingdom, huge differences that you wouldn't even, but across, and we talk about those differences and we educate everyone on the team about what those differences are going to be as part of our getting to know each other in that first bucket of building a sense of respect and how we treat one another. Anyway, that's a long answer to that.
No, that's really helpful, and it's a bigger. I'm sure that topic you could have a whole session on as well, because there's a lot more to get into. And I know Eric is a big advocate for D&I as well, so I know he appreciates that. Thanks, Vanessa. Derek, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you very much, Aoife. And I think what's really interesting as we talk, and I observed this talking to you a couple of days ago, Vanessa, is that this connects to everything. Everything that we value right now, everything that we're talking about getting the best out of people, it really is running almost as an oil that lubricates the whole machine and connects everything else that we do together. It's a fascinating topic. If I can go back and, conscious, we've still got 15 minutes, but conscious that I'm about to ask you a simple question that could take forever to answer. And apologies for that. But you talked about three elements, if you like, that help to build a sense of belonging. And the first one was that people have this sense of worth, this sense of they are valued in the team. The second one being that the team has a shared reality, that they are continually looking at themselves, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, the reality where they live. And then the third one, that people have a sense of control. Now, here's the big little question. For somebody who's on this session now who is saying, love this, what can I do when I get back to the office? In each of those buckets, is there one thing you could say, hey, now do this? Or are there a couple of things that you'd say, even without getting into the whole analysis, and obviously you'd like to put them through the team AI model and so on, what are things that people can do right away that are going to forward that sense of belonging in their teams?
Good. So you actually said two things, Derek. And so I want to start by talking about, very briefly, about something, you were talking about belonging weaving through everything. Yeah. I want to react to that for 1 second, and then I'll go to those actions, those concrete actions. One of the interesting things about belonging is that we are not aware. It's an innate, involuntary motive. Yeah. We know it's involuntary because we can tell you. I can say to you, Derek, you're in an MRI machine. I'm going to put you in a group, and they're going to be passing a ball around, and they're going to skip you. And you'll say, okay, and then say they'll skip you for a few minutes, and then they'll include you back again. Your brain freaks out when they skip you.
Even though I know.
even when you know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so you see, this is an involuntary motive. But here's the problem. It works kind of like our heart is pumping. You know, we don't have control over it. Matthew Lieberman, who is a neuroscientist at the University of California at Los Angeles, says we haven't designed organizations for this information. You know, the people crave that inclusion and that positive evaluation. But you know, you can't outthink it. He says you can't outthink it. Yeah. And so, but yet we're not aware of it. So I've tested. I've gone to audience. I said, how many of you feel like you have a need to belong? 2 people will raise their hand in a group out of 30. We're unaware of it. And part of it is because we're unaware that it's there. Sure. Like we'll be saying, yeah, you can skip me in the ball toss game. And our values, especially in the West, our values are that we need to be independent. And so there's a lot of work going on. A guy named Dale Miller from Stanford right now is talking about how these are our values and they are so inconsistent with our reality. We are so inconsistent. Why are we professing independence when we need people? We need people to do our work, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to say, if you ask your team, they're not going to tell you they need to belong. They don't have the language for it, and they know independence is value. So you have to assume it. Yeah. But this is what I would do if I were leading a team right now and I wanted to go in and I wanted to make some concrete changes. I would go in and I would say, let's take a look at our current team culture. There's been a lot of work these days on culture and how culture has a huge impact on behavior. And right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on, I'd like to kind of reboot our team. So what I want to do is I want to talk about a few things. First, I want to start with an exercise where we get to know each other a little bit better. Okay. We open up a little bit, okay? I will come back to some ideas for that. Then what I want to do is evaluate how we're doing. I want to do a SWOT analysis. Right now, what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And I want to somehow enable us to be able to really talk about the elephants in the room. Another way of hearing this, the moose in the room. Elephants are the things everybody knows about, but nobody's talking about. And the leader learns about that. So you want to profess, you want to say, what do you need in order to be able to really speak your truth? So you have that, there you have that. And then, of course, part of control is knowing what the stakeholders think. So you definitely want to represent the stakeholders. And if you're doing an offsite, or if you at some point soon, you bring in a couple of stakeholders to meetings to talk for 10 minutes about the impact of our team on their work, or what they need from us, or what's keeping them up at night. Okay. So those are 3 things. Now back to building relationships. I have a really super fun ways of doing that. One way that I love, have everybody bring in some digital photos of their last holiday, what they did on their last holiday, or what they did over, and put them, if you're meeting over Zoom, you can do this over Zoom, you post it up. Another way to do it is to have 5 questions, let the team decide what they are that you want to know about everyone. And you can do what we call in my field is a gallery walk. So everybody gets a piece of flip chart. We answer those questions on the flip chart. We hang them on the wall, and one by one we go around. Everybody can walk, and you can ask questions. And so we learn a little bit about one another. If you're on Zoom, which many people are, you can do that. Everyone bring up a PowerPoint slide. We'll go through it, and everybody can ask questions. And so the important thing is getting the questions that you want to ask and finding out what people want to know. Teams vary a lot on that. Some teams want to know, hey, do you have a partner? Do you have kids? And some teams want to know only about work. Right. Right. What's your background? What did you do before you came here? And it's amazing how little team members know about one another. Absolutely. It's just,
I noticed when we were the banner that we have for you up on LinkedIn says award-winning teacher and researcher, and as I'm hearing you talking, I'm hearing the response there. Teacher came before researcher in that banner, and you can hear the teacher in there, because it's very rare for somebody who's real researcher to be able to roll up their sleeves and say, here's something you can do practically. And I can, right from those initiatives you said, I can see people out there scribbling out, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, because really, really practical, so useful, so tremendously useful. We're about 9 minutes from closing. This is a kind of a catch-all, and it's probably for the times we live in. But how has the trend towards working from home, hybrid working, living through Zoom, etc., how has that affected your thinking on belonging and belongingness and so on and so forth? And how do you think it's going to affect it in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a big question right now.
Yeah.
It's
not a 9-minute question.
It's not a 9-minute question, but I can tell you a few things that I know. For one, I've been working with virtual teams. I've been working. Most of the teams I've worked with, or many of them, have been global teams, and so there's always been at least some component that's been virtual. Been doing team building on over Zoom since like the day Zoom came out. And you can do that. But there's no doubt about it. It creates psychological distance. Right. It's harder to build. It's harder to affirm. It's harder to give the nonverbals of affirmation. And nonverbals matter a lot. We know through emotional intelligence work that we send a lot of emotional signals through our nonverbals and our voice and our voice tone and things like that. But so you have to be careful about it. You have to check in with people. You got to let them know. You have to be more intentional. I'm going to use the word that you brought up earlier. Everything has to be more intentional. Yeah. And I would say you got to take a little more time to work with your team members and to connect, because they are psychologically more distant. Yeah. I having seen this for a couple of decades, what that psychological distance does is makes you feel like you're the only one that's split. Yeah. And so you need to let's get practical for a moment. You have to have your teammates meet for a cup of tea at some point during the afternoon, or and maybe a lunch, just a couple of them. You can have dyads, trios. People need to feel comfortable enough that they can text or pick up the phone. And this is where, let me say, leader emotional intelligence really matters. Yeah. In part because the leader can understand the picture that they're trying to create. Keep in mind, you want that picture. You want people emotionally engaged, emotionally feeling like they're emotionally accepted and belong and joined by others. And if you don't have that picture in your head, they want to feel like they have some sense of ownership over what's happening next, some model of what's really going on. Everybody's a little bit nervous about what's going on now. Everybody feels out of touch because they're not in the office, even more so. So those conversations where we get to create the model, we get to check in, and being the stakeholders, we don't bump into some of those stakeholders as often. So you have to have that model in your head. And when you're emotionally intelligent, you're more likely to have that model. So the current research that I've been seeing and I've been hearing about is that when the leader has that picture and works in that direction, and when they're able to control their own emotions, and when someone's supporting the leader, so it's easier for them to control their emotions. That stuff cascades down. Yeah. Emotional intelligence at the top cascades down. It enables that to happen in the team and more intentionally. And you can do it. It's never going to be the same. We're not going back. This is the new normal. That's what everybody's telling me. And
I can never see it go back. And to be honest, with the way our business works now, I wouldn't want it to go back. Because I think in some ways we've taken steps forward. Vanessa, thank you so much. One for your time, and then for being able to tap into your knowledge and your expertise. But thanks particularly for the energy, because I know that you'll have lit people up. I just want to bring Aoife in for one more question, just because I know when people come onto these things, they're always, I really want to know this. Aoife, pick the one that kind of lands for you, and then we'll thank. That's an Irish thing. We can't say H's. We'll thank Vanessa and close down. So would you like to pose just a final one from our audience?
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, Vanessa, so you may have guessed we have a lot of big emotional intelligence fans that follow our Genos live show. So Sven is asking, how you spoke about early on measuring the team emotional intelligence. So how were those results brought back into a team?
Sure. Well, there's you can do it in a quick and dirty way, or you can do it in a more thorough way. But you anonymously have people basically rate the team on how they're doing on these variables, and you collect that data and you show it back to the team. What really matters, what's going to happen, is that you're going to have variance. You're going to have variance. Some people are going to feel like they're known and they're respected more than others. And it's the variance that is something that's just as important as your average score. If you've got a score of 1 to 5, let's say, because what you have is, when you have people that don't feel good, it's a bad sign. And so you talk about that, and you don't try to pinpoint who is it, because you're often wrong. I've been doing this long enough to know that people always say, "Oh, well, that's so and so. They're always that way." And I'm telling you, it's so often not so and so. And so you talk about it with the team. And you say, what can we do? Let's come up with some concrete things we can do, and let's do them habitually. Don't make it a one-off. When you're creating a norm, when you're creating an environment, it's about the routines and the habits and the signals. And this is, Derek and I were talking about this earlier this week. The hardest part of this is reinforcing the changes. It's easy to do a one-off, one and done assessment, gallery walk, something like this. You got to do it periodically. Check in and let them know this is going to happen periodically. And by the way, when we're virtual, and Derek and I were talking about, I think we probably read the same research article, it's good to have these routines where people can count on having an opportunity, knowing when they're going to see each other, when they're going to be able to bring this up. It's more important when you're only meeting over Zoom. You're not going to meet people in the hallways, to have that scheduled time. So ask the team. You don't have to have the answers. You need to create the opportunity, and that requires self-control, right? That's scary. It's scary for a leader to open that up. So recognize that. We all feel that way, and do it anyway.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
A very quick one, Vanessa. If someone wanted to learn more about your work, is there somewhere that they should go to look at your research, or do you have a book published on the topic?
Yes, thank you. I'm working on a book right now. It should be done by the end of the year. And you can do that. You can go to my University of New Hampshire website. You're going to put in information about the HBR article, which at this point is 20 years old, but it's still a top seller for HBR. I would start with that. And if you have questions, come to Derek, come to you guys at Genos. I've been knowing all of you at Genos now for 22 years or something. Or come to me. It's fine. Okay.
Super.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will
Thank
be
you
sure
so much.
to blast out when your book comes out as well, Vanessa. And
Thank you so much
for your time today. Lots of thank yous coming in on the chat on LinkedIn as well. We appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Aoife. Thanks, Vanessa. I'll say bye-bye now in a moment. Vanessa, if you have one more minute, just to hang around so we can formally thank you at the end, behind the scenes, it'll be great. If you have to run, you have to run.
I'm good.
I'll catch you later. Great. So let me go back to, where am I going to here? Yeah, okay. So let me just remind you that next week we have got Andreas van der Heijt talking about building team culture. So until next time, next week's we'll be back to our 8:30 a.m. GMT time slot, because Andreas is based here in Europe. And so until then, wishing you all the very, very best. Please pop in any comments that you have down below, or any questions, etc., and we'd be delighted to come back to you. So with that said, have a really great week. Take care. Bye-bye.